Hey, and we're back for another episode of the MMA Prospectus. I'm joined once again by Patrick Wyman. Tom Grant's out stumping for Rand Paul right now, so he couldn't be with us.
Dude, the excuses for Tom's absence are by far the best part of this show. Like, by far the best part. And I say that as somebody who enjoys the show.
You've seen his "I Stand Behind Rand" in 2016 ass tattoo, right?
I have, yeah, yeah. I
Okay,
mean,
yeah, I mean,
so he's really standing behind him.
yeah. It's no surprise he's out on the campaign trail early, so he couldn't be with us today, and that's why we're down to just two. And you were scheduled to fight at Bellator, but you couldn't make weight, right?
So I was supposed to go to the Bellator show with Paul Gift of Bloody Elbow, the analytics writer, a damn fine guy and a damn fine kickboxer. But between my radio stuff this morning and my parents are in town and not getting the information from the California State Athletic Commission until Paul emailed it to me like 5 minutes before the thing was supposed to start, I decided that discretion was the better part of valor.
All right. Well,
We
that
can we can
happened.
go with this. We can go with this. I was supposed to fight at Bellator thing if you want. Let's see. I think I could make light heavyweight right now.
Well, it's just that was the first thing that came to my mind was when you were talking about, oh, you're going to be at Bellator, and then that you couldn't make the show. I just assumed that you were I mean, I've seen their undercards. You could make the cut.
Oh, dude! Like, let's not insult me by comparison to Bellator undercard fighters. Um, I, I kid. Well, hey, look at it this way. I came closer to making 205 than Hani Marks did. So,
That's right. But much closer. And to be fair, I think that this week's Bellator card might be a little worse for you to show up on. Otherwise, I mean, like, you've got like Saad Awad is on the undercard, and John Macapa. So there
yeah.
may be a couple of fighters on there that are worth taking a look at, and we might pass over some Bellator and World Series of Fighting stuff in this episode because there's really almost nothing to talk about from last week's UFC card, and then there's a bunch to talk about from this week's, but only a few fighters that I think we really want to spend a lot of time on.
Yeah. I mean, this last week's UFC card really kind of unusual in that it didn't have many fighters who were debuting or in their first or second or even third UFC fights. Yeah, it was the rare veteran card.
Yeah, and even for what few there were, a few debuting or young sort of talent fighters, most of them kind of ended up disappointing. Like, there weren't
Yeah.
that really that many guys that put on a great show where you could be like, oh, let's talk about Justin Jones, man. That's somebody to let's talk about Shamil Abdurakhimov.
Well, we can talk about the big homie himself, Timothy Johnson.
That's true.
Uh, uh, yeah, I mean, a fight where he's getting the crap kicked out of him for 4.5 minutes, manages to through a miracle end up in mount. Literally, the heavens parted to put Timothy Johnson in mount, and yeah, that was kind of that.
Yeah, it's kind of a sad. I mean, it's sad too because I think of Abdurakhimov as like a small heavyweight. It's like, oh, maybe cut down, make it to light heavyweight, be a little more natural there because he's not that big a dude. But he's 6'3" and 255, so
Yeah,
I don't know
he's
where
a
he
heavyweight.
carries that weight because he doesn't look that big. But the likelihood of him dropping 50 pounds is not high.
Yeah, I mean, it theoretically it could happen. There are light heavyweights who have gotten that big up between camps, but theoretically he was in shape at 255 pounds. I say theoretically. I mean, by heavyweight standards, he was in shape at 255. But this is kind of a random note to go off of here. But guys like Quentin Jackson and Forrest
Mhm.
Griffin would get up that high between camps. Like Rampage started his camp for God, I think it was when he fought Rashad. I think Rampage was like 260 when he started that camp and managed to get down to 205. I mean, he didn't look great in the fight, obviously, but like theoretically, it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, it could happen. I think there aren't honestly that many heavyweights who, if they decided to start cutting weight and maybe like lay off the weightlifting and do a little more running, wouldn't end up at 205. There are very few guys who like really have the natural frame to carry that weight.
Yeah.
And so maybe
no, go ahead.
I say maybe Abdurrahimov like could, but it just when you see a guy who's been around as long as he has, because it's not like it's like he's just getting his start in MMA. He's been around since 2008. He's really at the end of what would be considered being a prospect. He's like hit the UFC right in what should be his prime. You have to assume he's fighting at a point that he's reasonably comfortable.
Yeah, one would assume. I mean, heavyweights, it's weird. Like a lot of heavyweights, they just don't like cutting weight at all. I remember there was some weird rule that the Florida Athletic Commission came up with when Fabricio Verdum fought Mike Kyle back at, I think this was 2009, where they thought that it was too big of a weight difference between them, because I think Kyle came in at 222 and Verdum was at like 235 or so. And they made Verdum cut down to below 230. Like he had to come in at like 229 or 230 or something like that. And according to everybody in his camp, he just bitched and moaned and complained about like the 6 pounds he had to take off. Like this was something they were still making fun of him about like 5 years later. So a lot of why heavyweights don't cut to light heavyweight is because they like to eat. They don't like to, I don't know. I think there's something to that, and generally I don't want to encourage guys to cut that weight, but
yeah.
Hey, it's not always that physically they can't do it. I think a lot of them they're just big boys. They're big boys.
And on that note, I mean, Abdurrahimov looks just massively physically outgunned in the UFC. Mm-hmm. Like, he's obviously, that was a fight he was winning. He was doing well. He was competing, and then he got taken down once and mounted, and the fight was over. And like, you can't survive in the UFC with that skill set.
Yeah, I mean, this was. I think Tom pointed this out during the fights or after the fights. Did he talk about this on Inside the Guard? I don't know. I didn't watch this week, but he mentioned that like this is kind of an endemic problem for a lot of fighters coming out of the Russian scene, is that there's very little emphasis on your bottom game. It's just not and guard passing from the top is not something that gets a whole lot of emphasis either, because it's not something that's really highly incentivized in any of the component arts that make up the kind of standard Russian MMA skill set.
Yeah.
Like, you don't see a lot of dudes who are good off their backs, and you don't see a lot of emphasis on the kind of skills that would lead you to need to do that from your back. So basically, it's like, well, a lot of those guys are really hard to take down, but once you get them down, you can do basically whatever you want. When Rustam Khabilov, who took down Rustam Khabilov, and he just like couldn't get back up. Like this in one of his early fights, I think he still won the fight, but he got taken down. Jorge Masvidal took him down. Yeah. And Khabilov had like no idea how to get back to his feet. And Khabilov is better off his back than a lot of those guys are.
Yeah, and that's a lot of focus. There's a lot of focus on that circuit too, on like finishing really quick when you get an opportunity. So a lot of guys, their ground game consists of throw up a submission as quickly as possible and like be aggressive, but don't focus on like positional dominance or knowing how to actually fight in a situation. It's like, well, I tried for a triangle choke and I didn't get it, so now I'm just going to hold them down and hope that they stand me up.
Yep. There's a very, very great deal of that. It's rare when you get a guy who can do more, like Khabib. Back when he was fighting on the regional scene, Khabib's takedown defense was not nearly as impenetrable as he's shown in the UFC. I think his takedown defense has really gotten better since he started training at AKA and whatnot. But when he was on the Russian scene, you look at his record, he had a whole bunch of finishes by triangle.
Yeah.
And part of that was, part of that was, okay, the guy gets you down immediately, throw up the triangle and see if that works. But a lot of it too was like he was a little more patient. He had a better idea of what he was doing. He knew how to scramble back to his feet. He knew how to recover half guard, like things that we think of as really basic in other worldwide MMA scenes, like stuff that's just day one in Japan or in Brazil. I mean, I think especially in Brazil, but in the US too, like everybody learns that in their MMA gym, but it's not a thing that you see a lot in Russia.
No, it's not. And it presents an interesting problem, I think, especially for the bigger fighters, that we may see a lot of flameouts. A lot of guys come in with some hype and just totally burn out. I still have like, I think that there's also a chance that you'll see guys do like what Albert Tumanov did, which is look really bad in that first fight when when he got taken down. Just not have the tools at all, and then take that as an example of what he needs to work on and look much, much better dealing with it down the road.
Yeah, and in Tumanov's specific case, he's a guy who trains at the K Dojo gym in beautiful New Jersey. So if you haven't read this piece, you should. Bloody Elbows Kareem Zidane did a great interview with Hussein Kaliev, a Chechen fighter who also trains out of K Dojo a lot of the time. But those guys are in the U.S. They're getting a lot of them are getting U.S. opponents. And they're getting a more American style of training there, in addition to all the really good stuff that they brought out of the North Caucasus with them. So it's easier for guys from that gym than from, say, dude training in random gym in Makhachkala, like where that's just not something they're ever going to be exposed to. So Tumanov has looked fine since then. And I think a lot of it is there can be a kind of a rude awakening for fighters from other parts of the world when they're first exposed to the well-rounded games that you see in the UFC. It's a fundamentally different game in terms of weight cutting, in terms of bottom game, in terms of the way that fights are judged too. Like stuff that you take for granted if you only consume the UFC as your MMA product. It's a lot different out there otherwise.
Yeah, it's true. On that note, I think the only other person to talk about from this card is Juliana Pena. And really briefly, there's not a lot there to talk about. Basically, she looked good in what was a gimme matchup for somebody who was going to fit exactly into her style. Same Russian problems of being totally clueless off your back. And that was it. It's not really, doesn't tell me anything about Pena. It was like, it's good to see that she looked more or less the same. It did show that, unfortunately, she hasn't improved anything at all. Like, she still got taken down immediately with some pretty sloppy takedown work early on.
I don't know if I would say that it was all that sloppy. I mean, I think that Dudieva does two things well. She hits good clinch takedowns, and she's really, really strong. Also, kind of an underrated thing is, like, Dudieva gets good clinch takedowns, and she throws a mean right hand, and those are literally the only two things she does well. Now, it doesn't say great things about Pena's kind of fight awareness, that she just walked right into one of the two things that Dudieva does well. But I don't know. I'm not down on her, but if she can get out there and get another win in the next couple of months, then we'll know a lot more about where Pena stands and what her ceiling is. But we didn't learn anything new about her, aside from the fact that the injury did not rob her of everything good about her game.
Yeah, she's still the same basic physical fighter, and it's just, the same basic physical fighter. Like, nothing new.
That was some ugly ass striking from Mount. Just real not good. Like a waste of. I mean, if the fight had gone longer, that was a waste of energy. Most of what she was doing, like throwing shots that had no hope of landing, and just a constant stream of shitty strikes. Like, I don't know what they're teaching, but like this strikes me as true of a lot of MMA ground striking. Like, watch some Fedor videos. Watch some Jacare videos and see what that's supposed to look like. Watch Russian Sambo coaches teaching ground striking, and that's not what it looks like. You know what I mean? Like, learn how to create space, posture, and torque your body into your ground strikes.
And the weird thing to me, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but the weird thing to me there is that if you look at like all your great champions, pretty much every single great championship fighter in MMA history has been an incredible ground striker. All of them, you know, Anderson Silva, George St. Pierre, Matt Hughes, Tito Ortiz, maybe Chuck Liddell is like your exception, but Cain Velasquez, you know, Jose Aldo.
Robbie Lawler is a great ground striker.
Like all of these fighters are great at this. If you're teaching fighters, like you can, that is like a universal theme. This isn't like, oh, well, you know, a few good jiu-jitsu guys here. We don't really need to train the Novi Unao arm triangle. That's their thing. This is literally all your great champions are great at striking on the ground.
It's not an incredible
how to do it.
Sorry. Yeah, it's not an incredibly difficult skill to pick up. Like if you like, I mean, it takes practice and you have to work on it. I think that's the thing is I think a lot of coaches and a lot of fighters assume that like, well, you get on top and you just hit them. Like what more is there to it? And really, it does not take a tremendous amount of training to become better at it. Like, but it does require training. You have to work on it. You have to work on how to create space, how to posture, and just twerking your body into those shots. Like, but you're absolutely right, saying like, you know, I'm struggling to think of, I don't know if I would say that they have all been great ground strikers, but they've all been above average. Like even Jose Aldo, you watch Aldo work from top position and he can throw bombs. Like he knows how to do it.
Like maybe Penn is like your exception. He's, you know, he was never really known to be a great striker on the ground. But and that
Penn,
sorry.
Yeah. Oh, Penn was tough though, because when he did get in top position, which was rare, that wasn't normally something that he did a lot of. It was generally against much bigger guys who could kind of tie him up. Like I'm thinking specifically of the Fitch fight, where he took Fitch down a whole bunch and spent a lot of time on top. But Fitch, who was always kind of an underrated grappler from the bottom, did a good job of tying him up and made it hard to create space. I think. Go ahead.
I think like Penn's like star moment of ground striking is probably like, was it the Cal Uno fight? Who was it that he just like wrecked on their way up?
Was it Uno?
Oh, it was somebody Japanese. That's totally gonna bug me if that was it was Cal Uno back at UFC like 34. This is before they drew at 41.
Yeah, when he just came right out of the gate and blitzed him. Yeah, I mean, he did that so actually I think even BJ Penn had well above average ground striking. But it just seems like one of those skill sets that like that should be fairly basic, and yet we see so many fighters. Now that I'm thinking about this is turning into a real pet peeve as we speak now. Like this turned into a real pet peeve. Just too many guys who don't know how to throw hard ground strikes.
And you know what? Oh, sorry, I keep jumping on you. Go for it.
And we'll talk about these guys a lot more next week and the week after, I'm sure. But two prospects who are fighting in a couple of weeks: Aljamain Sterling and Tomas Almeida. Like Almeida is not even a top control guy, and you rarely see him shoot for takedowns. But if he knocks you down and he gets on top, he's going to beat the crap out of you. You know, that's not like a skill that is essential to his game, but he's good at it. He's still good at it. Aljamain Sterling throws bombs from the top, and that's part of what makes them really good prospects in general and really good bets going forward. Is like, oh yeah, if they get you there, they're going to hurt you. Like whether that's a thing that they're trying to do or not. When they get into what is obviously an advantageous position, they know how to capitalize. Sorry. So that's it.
Well, I was going to say, and, you know, speaking of like on the women's side of things, you know, somebody who obviously spends a ton of time working on her ground striking is Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Like, you see it in her highlight when she's doing training and like highlight videos and stuff like that. a big portion of like her open workout for Carla Esparza was like a coach on his back with a focus mitt and her just like winging punches onto that focus mitt from, straddling over somebody on the ground. It's something she
Mhm.
really focuses on, and it's something she does really well.
Yeah, and this is one of those things where like Joe Rogan on the broadcast is going to say, well, you take a great striker on the feet, they're going to throw real good ground and pound too. It's like, no, that's not the case. They are different skill sets, and you have to work them both. Like you may have a propensity for being a better ground striker as a result of being a better striker on your feet, but the motions are different. And like I don't quite know how to explain this to anybody who's never trained it, but like you really have to focus on your posture and where your base is, and you have to work on creating enough space to really kind of torque and throw. It's not the same thing. Doing the one makes you better at the other, but it just takes training, and maybe what we need to see is more of that. I don't know.
Yeah, and there are circuits. I mean, like you can look at the Polish circuit is like my classic like disproving point of that is because like there are a bunch of great strikers on that circuit who are just like wild grapplers or like just total stall clinch fighters on the ground. Like
Mhm.
no grappling, no ground and pound whatsoever.
Yeah. So that's actually a great segue for us looking forward at this Krakow card tomorrow. Yeah, the Polish scene is kind of weird like that. For those of our viewers who aren't real familiar with it, the defining kind of characteristics of the Polish MMA scene to me, you're going to have guys who are really good at different pieces of the game, and they may actually be really good at all of them. But there's very little connection between those skill sets from what I've seen. Like you rarely see a guy who's a good transitional fighter. Like Joanna Jędrzejczyk, strangely enough, did not spend a whole lot of time fighting on the Polish scene. I mean, she was in Cage Warriors and she was in Invicta. So like it's the first Polish UFC champion, not really a product of the Polish scene, I don't think. But and Jędrzejczyk is a very good transitional fighter. But God, where was I going with that? But yeah, so you have a lot of prospects who come up in Poland who will throw really nice strikes. They're solid strikers. They may be pretty good wrestlers, and a lot of them are really, really nasty on the ground, really aggressive, really submission oriented. But you just see very little emphasis on striking into takedowns or immediately looking to pass once you hit the ground. Like it's all very by the book and disconnected in every phase.
Yeah, and it's just one of those like I think you could almost say that was also true of the British scene like 3 or 4 years ago. I
Yeah.
think it's just a stage of the evolution of the game, like maybe true of the US scene 10 years ago.
Hmm.
Like as these regions develop the MMA metagame, that's like this stage that you go through is where you get all these people who are like really getting to train and train well all the pieces, but they don't put them all together yet. And after a while, like we see with the modern UK fighters coming out, a lot of them do have like a totally connected game. Like they're good, well-rounded fighters.
This occurs to me. I think you're absolutely onto something there. I think you're absolutely right about that, because I'm thinking right now of a whole bunch of Brazilian fighters who started, 2004, 2005, 2006, somewhere in there. Like Glaristone Santos, Toninho
Mm-hmm.
Furia. He's had a couple of fights in Titan, but for a long time he was like the best unsigned featherweight in the world.
Yeah.
Like really, really solid fighter at a Brazilian top team. But so he's the quintessential example of that as a stage of evolution. Or like look at Leandro Ego, who's on this season of the Ultimate Fighter Brazil, started fighting in about 2006. You look at the early careers of some of the Nova União guys. You look at like Aldo and Barão back in their early fights, and they were good at everything. But they weren't really they weren't very good in transition. And I think even now, like Aldo is not a great transitional fighter, except defensively. Defensively, he's very good in transition, but offensively, not so much. And Barão too. will go through these phases where he's in either striking mode or he's in offensive wrestling mode, and the two are not really all that well connected. So, but now, like, you get a lot of Brazilian fighters who started fighting in the last 3-4 years, who really have a much more connected and much more put together MMA game. And I think you're right. It is an evolution thing, and it's because you get coaches who were once fighters who have figured these things out over the course of their careers. Like my coach was talking about the guy who coached the guy who now coaches all of these new chute box guys in Brazil, Diego Lima's coach, Luis Azeredo. Luis Azeredo, who was an old school chute box guy, and they weren't training phase shifting all that much at chute box back in the day in any meaningful sense. But Azeredo picked this up over the course of his long career, passed it on to Diego Lima, who now coaches Tomas Almeida, Lucas Martins, God, what's his name? Felipe Aranches, a whole bunch of like prospects on that scene who are all really good phase shifters, all of them. So I think you're right. I think it is an evolutionary process, and it has to do with the way that knowledge is picked up and transmitted from generation to generation.
Yeah, that's probably the generational thing is really probably hits home, is where you finally get enough guys who have enough experience in the sport for long enough that they are, they spent 10 years in the sport, and they're now turning around and they're coaching people who can be like 3 or 4 or 5 years into their career. So you're talking like 10 or 15 years into the scene, you're starting to get people who really have some experience and who can really put something together. And Poland's just not there yet. That scene hasn't been going for that long. It's been around for a while now, but it's not nearly as well developed as some of the other ones. It's ahead of, it's ahead of Ukraine, it's ahead of South Korea and some of those places maybe, but not quite up to like the UK and US and Canada and some of the places that have really had a long time to work on this. Yeah. So on that note, though,
one more kind of concrete example of how that stuff gets passed on and transmitted. Look at the Nogueiras and Team Nogueira. Like, I guarantee you, both of the Nogueira brothers teach phase shifting a lot better than they do it themselves, and you can see that with some of the younger guys who have come out of Team Nogueira. Like that, neither of the Nogueiras is good at phase shifting at all. Like, they both, in fact, they both are kind of defined by how not good they are at it. But they're fighters, guys that they spend a lot of time with and a lot of time training. Those guys all do it well. So I think there's one more concrete example.
Yeah, no, and it's a good point. I mean, it's just one of those things we should look at. And on that note, we have a card full of Polish prospects to look at, most of whom are not very good at phase shifting and could be defined, in fact, by their not being good at phase shifting.
Yep.
Anyone on this card that you are particularly most excited about?
So I would say actually excited about. Excited is a strong word, Zane.
Anybody that you think will shine on this card?
I think that Leon Edwards will. So not a Polish prospect at all. Yeah. He is fighting, I guess, American-Polish guy, Seth Baczynski. Leon Edwards is a prospect out of the UK who made his debut on a random-ass Brazil card in November and had a really close fight with Claudio Henrique da Silva. Ironic, considering Claudio Henrique da Silva is based out of London, so you could have just had the goddamn fight in London. You didn't need to go to Brazil for it. But so he had a really close fight with Claudio Henrique da Silva, and anywhere else that decision might have gone his way. But he lost a tight decision. I think he came in on 10 or 12 days notice. It was really late notice for it. And I expect that we get and he was a fairly well touted prospect beforehand. I think that in this fight we'll get this is why people were excited about this dude kind of performance. He's a fairly low output striker, but he's a really, really, really good counter striker. He's very fast. He's very powerful. And I expect him to take out Baczynski.
Yeah, very accurate too. Like, he's a guy who really, when he throws a shot, it almost always lands right where he means it to, I definitely he's the guy that I hope to see the most out of, especially because he's not, Bashinsky's a big welterweight, and Edwards coming down from middleweight, at least from the photos I could see at the weigh-ins, looks just as big. And that was really going to be Bashinsky's, like, if he had a crutch in this fight, I think that would have been it.
Yeah, I think I think this is a good matchup for Edwards because Basinski's huge. I mean, he's tall, but he's not that strong. I've never thought like Basinski, like despite his height, Basinski has never seemed to me to be one of those guys who's really going to muscle you around. Which was not the case in Edwards' last fight with Da Silva. Da Silva really got in on him and kind of muscled him around, but Da Silva is a big welterweight. Man, he's got that sick, like I've been a black belt for 10 years kind of grappler strength. And I think that's a lot of the time a problem for a guy who's more striking oriented like Edwards to deal with. Basinski, I don't think has that. And Basinski too is kind of a defensively suspect out fighter, which strikes me as a pretty good matchup for a counter puncher of Edwards' quality. So he's really I think the best prospect right now on this card.
Yeah. It didn't help either that De Silva has a chin that's like carved out of granite. Like that's the thing that really Claudio Silva's one saving grace is that he can just walk straight ahead through any shot that anybody throws at him, and then cling on to them and drag them to the ground and grapple them. So
yeah. I mean, we've talked on this show a number of times about how one of the big differences between the UFC level of competition and the regionals is not so much skill, but just sheer physical durability. Yeah. And Claudio Enrique Da Silva is a really, really good example of that. But I look for Edwards to come out and do some good things and get some people talking about him here versus the Polish Pistola.
Yeah. The two fighters I'm looking forward to, just like to really shine as well. And maybe not, and unfortunately, once again, it's like at the expense of the Polish fighters they're matched up against are Stevie Ray and Sheldon Westcott.
Yeah, those are two good picks.
Yeah, I was watching Ray again recently, because I remember, like, I've seen a few of his fights, and it's like, he's got a collection of skills that, like, he's fun and he's competitive, but he's not, like, top tier prospect kind of, heading. Mm-hmm. But watching him again, like, he really does, like, he didn't, he came into MMA, he's an MMA native, like, just started in MMA as a teenager, has done nothing else. And he's got a lot of the physical tools to be a good prospect. Like, he has a lot of power. He doesn't have great combination striking, but, he's one of those guys who's, like, solid everywhere. He's a good grappler, a good wrestler, a good striker, has power, really competitive, really feisty fighter. And even if he's not going to be, like, a championship level, contender, he could still end up being a really fun long-term action fighter for the UFC. So he's somebody I think, and Bandel's just another one of those guys. Like, yeah, he's a good grappler, but man, he just got absolutely torn to shreds by Mairbek Taisimov.
And Taisimov is a good fighter. In fairness to Bandel, Taisimov has looked real legit. But yeah, what surprised me, and I'd watched Stevie Ray before on some Cage Warriors shows, but I had kind of forgotten what a good athlete he is. I was struck when we were talking about his physical tools, and not even just his power. Like, he's quick, he's well put together, he's well coordinated. The way he moves to me says athlete. And that is not the case with Bandel at all. Bandel is and you could see that to me was the big thing that I took from that fight with Taisimov, because for all of Taisimov's many flaws as a fighter, and he has them, he is a monstrous physical specimen. Yeah, and just real fast, hits real hard. But I think that's exactly the kind of thing that's going to be a problem for Bandel here, as long as the short notice bit of it doesn't just absolutely kill Ray's gas tank, because he is a big fighter.
Yeah.
He's pretty good size for that weight class. So unless the cut really takes it out of him, I look for Ray to be impressive there. And kind of on the same note, same deal with Sheldon Westcott. Big, physically talented, strong, hits hard. But in Westcott's case, I'm a little concerned that a guy who gassed out bad with a full training camp at 185, what that's going to look like dropping to 170 now. Does that concern you, Zane?
A little. I think my thing with Westcott is that
Hello?
he's one. Oh, can you hear me?
May have lost Zane here. You there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Now I can.
Okay. Here's a lag test.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, we're good. The reason I think I'm not as concerned is just that Westcott seems like one of those fighters that he really thrives in the scramble early in fights. And I think Pavlak will give him that, or Pavlak will give him that. Like, that's the thing, is that I think if, against Elias Theodorou is huge and powerful and just like the kind of guy who's going to really wear on you and make you work a lot harder than you want to.
Yep.
I don't think Pavlak's that guy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And speaking to the point that we were discussing earlier about phase shifting and transitions, this will be an interesting fight in that regard because Pavlak he's a good grappler, he's a good wrestler, he's a pretty good striker. Yep. But Pavlak does not put those skills together in any meaningful way, where Westcott is kind of a little underwhelming everywhere, but where he really shines is in the transitions. He really shines in the scrambles. He really shines when he's able to force you into those transitional spaces. So, and I think that's where Westcott wins the fight. I think that Pavlak shoots a crappy takedown and Westcott kind of beats him up from the sprawl or the front headlock or something like that. Like, that's what that fight looks like to me. I too am picking Westcott there pretty comfortably.
Yeah, so those are some people that I expect to look good. Unfortunately, like I think the one I'm picking Fabinski to win his fight against Garrett McClellan. I think he's just the better, more powerful, more well-designed fighter. Like he's actually a Polish fighter who does transition pretty well. Like he does strike on the ground pretty well. He does strike in the clinch and all that pretty well. He's not like a lot of his game is not well refined, but he's still like he has a pretty solid game. Whereas McClellan's just kind of all over, like I'll throw an overhand winging hook and then go for a trip takedown and then pull for an armbar, and that's not a good style to have.
Yeah. I mean, it's I was not real impressed with what I saw from McClellan on film. Speaking of how far behind various regional games are, the South African regional scene is a ways behind Poland.
Yeah, it's more like Ukraine.
Yeah, it really is. It really is, and not in a good way. Not in the oh wow, this dude just got killed dead on an O-plot card fun way. Not that that's funny, but the South African scene, you get guys coming out of that scene who have real good physical tools. And McClellan is one of them. To me, if McClellan wins this fight, it's going to be because he's bigger, much stronger, and much faster than Fabinski is. And that seems like the basic dynamic of the fight to me, that Fabinski is skill-wise much better. And Fabinski is not big either. And McClellan is a fairly good-sized dude. So
Fabinski's a lot thicker, though. I mean, he just cut from middleweight for like the fight before this fight. He's not as tall, but he's a lot thicker than McClellan.
I see. I kind of disagree. Maybe I'm just misremembering because I watched so many bald Polish dudes for this fight. Only partially joking. There are a lot of bald Polish fighters. But maybe I'm misremembering. But he did not seem very big to me. I could be wrong about that. I could just be misremembering. But I really did not think that he had all that much size on him. But okay, kind of an interesting prospect a little further down the card. What did you think of Damian Stasiak?
I like Stasiak's game more than I thought I would. He was the other fighter that I think from Poland that could really like actually put together a good in performance, especially just against Yevton Meza. I expect Stasiak to win one way or another. But he's got a good complicated kicking game, which if he gets the time to use it, is fun to watch at least. And then he's a pretty good wrestler and a very good controlling grappler. Like he's got a really smart, studied, and careful top game. He goes,
Yep.
and not unaggressive either. Like he strikes well from the top. He moves to find aggressive submission positions, and he works that really well. Unfortunately, for being as great a karate champion as he is, his striking is really not anything to write home about other than his flashy kicking game. But the grappling is good.
Yeah. Yeah. The reason I wanted to bring him up is because even though it is the curtain jerker of the card, I actually think he is the most interesting Polish prospect that they picked up for this. And they picked him up on short notice. He just beat a guy that you guys had on your scouting report, Mike Grundy, right?
Yeah, he did. And, it's the classic, like, prospect loss for Grundy of getting triangle choked with Stasiak off his back. Like,
Yeah.
I need to see the fight, but I already know how it went. Like I can see that fight, every bit of it in my head from the outset.
Yeah, pretty standard raw prospect runs into more experienced dude with deeper skill set and walks themselves into something. Like, yeah, but so Stasiak, I'm interested. He's got a real interesting mixture of skills between that karate background and his wrestling and his submission repertoire. And like sucks for poor Yadi Meza, but like that dude just keeps getting thrown in there. And it actually would not surprise me if Meza won this fight, just given the short notice and everything for Stasiak. But like, yeah, I mean that dude is just not on this level. He ain't cut out for this.
No, and to be perfectly frank, if he can't beat Damian Stasiak, he's really not cut out for this. I mean, Stasiak, I expect him to win. I expect him to be one of the better Polish performances on this card, but that's a really low bar. Like, I think the baseline on Stasiak is I just don't see him having the physical tools to be a top level UFC fighter. He seems like a guy with a deep technical knowledge, and who, like I say, his grappling game is really solid, but he's just not like a really flashy athlete who's going to show you, who's going to amaze you in the cage.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm quite interested in this. I just think that on a card where the UFC did not pick up some of the better Polish prospects out there, I think that he's the most interesting one and the one who has, I guess I would say, the potential to go the furthest.
Yeah.
It's a tough division, and again, your point about his lack of physical tools is a salient one. I think that's not wrong at all. I just think he's probably the most interesting one. The kind of switching gears a little bit, the UFC picked up 3 women's strawweights for this card. They picked up Isabella Badurek, Alexandra Albu, Russian, who they initially picked up to fight at bantamweight, and I guess is now going to be fighting at 115.
They got her.
Picked her up a while.
She just fucked her knee up something fierce and has been out ever since. And then they got a strawweight. I mean, they picked her up long enough ago that they have had a strawweight division. Like they built that while she was under contract.
Yeah, and her opponent, Isabella Badurek, she has fought as high as 145 pounds, and this will be her strawweight debut as well. Did they both make the weight? I don't know. I haven't seen the weigh-in results.
That Badurek might have been a pound off, but nothing like we should care about. I mean, her cut may have been a little bit hard, but I don't even know if she reweighed in. I'm sure she made weight. If she didn't, then whatever. It's not, it's a pound.
Yeah. So that's that to me is a matchup of 2 fighters that not real interesting now, but in a couple of years they could both be pretty good. They're both really, really raw.
Yeah. it's one of those things where there's like I know so little about them. Even having watched film on both of them, there's so little you can take away that you can't even mark them as prospects. It's just like these are fighters that will hopefully show us something. It's like Lapalus and Lee, you know, like
Yeah.
you really don't know what they're going to be able to do in the UFC at all. At all.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing that I saw with Albu in looking at film of her is how physically talented she is.
Yeah.
She is a hellacious athlete.
Yep.
Like really, she got a lot of pop on her kicks. Like really sharp, stinging kicks. She moves well. When she moves, she's got kind of weird footwork, and so that was strange. But when she moves real fast. And so I picked her to win kind of on that basis that like unless this injury has just utterly ruined her, she should be the substantially more impressive physical specimen in the cage. But Bodorek is going to be big. She's going to be a really big 115 pounder by the time she gets the weight back on, because she wasn't like small at 145 or 135. I mean, she was short, but she wasn't small.
Yeah. I mean, Bodorek, she's a really strikes me as a really strong clinch, top control, ground fighter, you know, and decent there. So just the question to me is, we don't know anything about Albu's ground game at all, like nothing. You know, we don't know what she. Oh, sorry.
Well, like we watched her I don't know if you saw the film. I saw a film of her in a grappling tournament, and I watched that, and she looked like she knew what she was doing, but like there wasn't a whole lot to take from it. You know, I think she submitted the woman in like 3 or 4 minutes. Like it was hard to get any real sense of what she's going to look like on the ground in an MMA fight. Her team claims that she's had a whole bunch more MMA fights, right? They claim that she's like 5-0, and I think the UFC is billing her at 5-0, but I haven't seen any evidence that that's the case.
Well, I don't doubt it, just because it's probably it's probably like full contact combat sambo, or it could be kudo, could be pancrase, could be any of the kick jitsu, any of this weird shit that Russia does constantly that is 9/10 MMA and that doesn't show up on a lot of official records. Like every Russian fighter I look at has 2 or 3 fights that are unrecorded anywhere else. Like I can find the video of them and they aren't recorded, and then I'll go and like I'll go look for, you know, I'll go to like Sherdog and I'll write them and I'll be like, hey, here's some fights for this person that you guys don't have recorded. You guys should add them to their record. And then, you know, I'll get an email back like 3 days later, like, oh yeah, you know, we talked to some of our people there, and that's actually officially called a pancration bout, and so the local governing body doesn't consider it a licensed MMA match, so we can't include it on the record. And it's just like, you know, that was like the who was it that Yaroslav Amislav beat?
Was it Sultan Aliyev? Well, because this happened to Sultan Aliyev before he fought in I guess they called it a pancration bout, or a kind of a expanded rules sambo bout. It was something like that. I can't remember what term they used for it. I asked somebody about it, and Aliyev got submitted, but it wasn't on his record. I saw the fight, and I'm like, well, okay, why isn't this on his record? It was in a ring, like they were wearing MMA gloves, they weren't wearing a kurtka, like I couldn't figure it out. And they're like, oh yeah, no, this was just that was a sambo bout, like that wasn't an MMA. I'm like, for all intents and purposes, this is an MMA fight, you know. It was scheduled for 3 5-minute rounds, for Christ's sake. Like,
yeah, so you see that kind of stuff a lot. And partially, I think it's also one of the things they do to like protect favorite fighters, where if it's like a region and you go to that region to fight somebody and you win, then it'll suddenly be like, oh, that's not an MMA fight. No, that doesn't go on his record. That's just this is an exhibition, a combat sambo exhibition.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we get it. You see a lot of that in the Russian scene, the quote unquote combat sambo exhibition. I'm trying to think, what was the. Yeah, so I heard a story about from somebody involved in the Cage Warriors card in Grozny, that a number of the Chechen fighters and the Chechen sports officials took great exception to the records that were on Sherdog for it, and so they were in there trying to get bouts added and subtracted to the records to make themselves look better. And apparently, at one point, a gun was pulled, and so this is a thing that happens on the Russian scene. Like a lot of stuff that might as well be MMA, and you just don't know.
Yeah, so I don't doubt that Albu's 5-0 for all intents and purposes. Like, I wouldn't doubt that she's like 5-3. Like any of that could be possible. We have no idea. It's like in some ways, it's a step for record keeping. It's a step above China, but it's not a big step.
Yeah, it is a smaller step than you might think.
Yeah, especially for a circuit that's so well developed and that produces such good talent. It's amazing how like shoddy and haphazard their record keeping is.
Yeah.
Anyway,
this is absolutely true.
So let's see. Otherwise, I mean, looking at who else. I'm hoping Michael Lebu does well.
He was a guy that you actually really liked. I can't remember what you were watching him for, but you really liked him, right?
We scouted him for the welterweight scouting report, and there was some confusion in scouting him on Tom's part. I'm going to blame Tom for that. He thought that he was somebody else watching some tape and was like, "Oh yeah, this guy's awesome," but we still scouted him pretty extensively and ended up putting him on our extra. And I remember when I wrote the extra scouting report for him. I was talking about him in terms of looking at like guys like Glenn Sparv, Davey Gallen, some of the Finnish fighters on the Finnish scene as well. And I was like, this is the guy. If any of these guys are getting to the UFC, this is the guy I expect to get there, and he has a chance to really overperform once he's there, because while he's not a great athlete, he's really tough everywhere.
Yeah, I think it's kind of unfortunate that this is the matchup that he got. Like, I think that if you gave him almost any other welterweight on Marias's level, Lebu would have a much better chance. I just think that it's going to be hard for Lebu to avoid going to the ground in this fight because he really likes to. He likes to be on top. He likes to transition. He's one of the few French fighters who is really comfortable throwing ground strikes from top position, which is not allowed is not allowed in France. So I actually like him quite a bit, but I think that this is a really rough matchup for him, and I think that Marias probably submits him.
Yeah, I think there's a chance that Lebu loses a decision, just because his submission defense is really good. But I still think it would be like losing a decision. I still think it'd be him getting outworked for 15 minutes straight by Moraes.
Yeah, that seems possible. I really don't know. Like I am interested in that fight. I'm interested in Lebu. Is there anybody else on it? So Taylor Lapilus and Rocky Lee, both dudes who are just so raw. You have no idea how good they're going to be in this fight or how good they could be eventually. Like, they're unmolded balls of clay.
Yeah, there's nothing to know there. There really isn't. Like, you can watch all the tape you want. You can scout them as much as you want. But it's like watching tough Latin America guys, You just, like, what are you really going to see here? Like, my tough Latin America picks coming into that to the debut to the finale rather was was pick all the tough Mexico team because they're much better. Like, they've had a better camp behind them, and they all won.
Yeah, it was like it's just so hard to know. And in this case, Lapilus, I don't think has ever had a fight under rules where you can strike the head of a grounded opponent, like with anything. I don't think he's ever had a fight outside France. And with Lee, but also with Lapilus, I don't think his brother is also a fighter, Damian Lapilus. He fought Joe Duffy in Cage Warriors a few months ago. I don't think that Taylor is quite as the athlete that his brother is. dudes. Like
Really,
Damian Lapierre.
I kind of felt the other way around about it. I felt like Taylor, at least maybe I thought Taylor was the more studied striker, the more technical
Oh yeah,
striker.
Taylor
Yeah.
is a better striker. I just did not see a lot of physicality from him, and that could be because I was watching tape of him fighting when he was 20 or so, or 20 or 21, and maybe he's gotten faster and stronger now that he's a couple of years older. But I don't know. I don't have high expectations for that fight. That's going to be one where I don't watch it as my default mode, and if somebody tells me that interesting things happen, then I'll watch it. But I'm not going. But otherwise, like with Lee, you have literally no idea. I will say one quick note on Rocky Lee before we move on to more productive matters. There's a fight of his on YouTube from Taiwan that has the best commentary I have ever heard in an MMA fight. Like, I mean that seriously. The guy, let me pull up some of the quotes that I pulled from this. I was live tweeting it at like midnight when I was watching this kid fight. And it is just epically fantastic stuff. Just amazing. So he repeatedly, in lieu of talking about leg kicks, he repeatedly used the phrase, I kicked him in the ass. Good ass kick right there. Kicked him right in the ass. Let's see. I'm gonna find some more of these because they're real good. Like the dude, he repeatedly referred to a leg lock as a quote unquote knee bar, or he repeatedly referred to a leg lock as a leg bar. I'm sorry, a leg
bar. Nice. I like that.
Yeah, Rocky just went for a leg bar attempt there. Another leg bar coming up right here. He hit him with a knee kick right there. Glances in with a glancing head kick. Nice spinning kick thing. Then this was my personal favorite. This was the best one. Solid kick right there. Might have caught a bit of a nut in the end. Yeah. So that was. So if you're looking to do some research on Rocky Lee, just keep your eye out for that because that was the best part about it.
This is all. I was gonna say that is.
This was all.
What? Sorry.
That was all one fight. Yeah. One round, actually.
That's incredibly damning, I gotta say. That when you're talking about a young fighter, the only thing that you have to talk about is how hilarious the commentary on one of his fights was.
If you like, I just think he's super raw. I mean, you watch him, and he's actually not a bad athlete at all. He moves pretty well. What?
Can I stop you a sec? That wasn't an invitation to talk more about Rocky Lee. I just wanted to say that. That wasn't like, I want to hear more about how good Rocky Lee was. That was meant as sort of a standalone statement.
Yeah, it is damning. But no, I mean, Lee's like, he's unmolded. Like, if he were with a really big, really good camp, maybe he could turn it into something. But I don't know. I'm not confident in that. I picked Lapulus kind of by default.
That's how all the foreign tough guys are. Anybody who goes through the tough system overseas is almost by default a great athlete who could be an okay fighter if they actually trained at a real gym.
Yeah, that's true of a lot of. That was true of a lot of the tough China dudes. Like, I was surprised at how good physically those dudes were. I expected them to be much less impressive, but I mean, and Rocky Lee's kind of that way. That this is true, less so of the tough Brazil guys, but that's a much different situation.
Yeah. Although, did you know that none of the international tough seasons, including Brazil, Australia, and England, have yet to produce one ranked UFC fighter? Really, as of right now? Yeah. Or the entirety of their existence? Because wasn't Norman Park ranked real briefly for a hot second? Norman Park might be like they're right now. None of them are ranked, and across all the seasons that they've produced. So Norman Park maybe they may have had a couple guys flit into the rankings briefly, but nobody has actually become a top ranked fighter. I mean, I thought that it would be Robert Whittaker, really. Yeah. Of all of those dudes, I liked the way that Whittaker was put together, and I still like him. I still think he's good, but you're just not going to get far as a 5'11" middleweight. I think he's generously listed at 5'11". I think he's probably closer to 5'9" or 5'10". Well, we just don't know yet. I mean, that's an experiment that has yet to win or fail. It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah. I mean, Clint Hester is not a bad fighter. I mean,
yeah.
and I think that there's like something to take from knocking him out, but still, Whitaker got hit too much, way too much.
So let's take a quick look at the other regional, or not regional, but the other MMA cards this weekend, just for something to look at. Um, Honestly, looking at this Bellator card, there are two fighters that are really, I think, the only two fighters worth looking at as young talents on the whole thing, and that's Rafael Carvalho and Tony Johnson. And
Hmm.
I am not including Marcin Held or Fabricio de Cis Costa da Silva because Held, at the tender young age of 23, has been fighting since 2008, and Fabricio de Assis Costa da Silva, at the tender young age of 24, has been fighting since 2009.
Yeah, Fabricio, the Fabricio gentleman there, better known as Fabricio Guerrero,
Yep.
who I believe, if memory serves correctly, he was the #1 prospect on Leland and Smoogy's second list, right?
Yeah.
Lightweight, solid fighter. He's now at featherweight. John Macapá Teixeira was a contestant on the first season of the Ultimate Fighter Brazil. Also a dude who has a lot of experience at this point. He probably should have gotten the chance to stick around the UFC. He probably should not have been cut.
Yeah,
He was
he
a
struck
solid
me.
fighter.
He struck me as sort of a prototypical Nova Uniao fighter who's just not quite physical enough to be a dominant fighter. Like, he's good enough to be in the UFC and to compete there, just not the athlete who's gonna go in and like use that style in the same way that Jose Aldo or Renan Barão have.
Yeah, that's really true. He was a dude who wanted to fight you on the inside and didn't really have the physicality or the strength to be an inside fighter against elite opposition. That was what I took from that. But leaving aside those guys, Tony Johnson, interesting prospect, real interesting prospect. And that's actually been true of him his entire life because he was a high-level defensive line prospect coming out of high school. I remember seeing his name on like rivals.com and scout.com back in like 2005 or 2006 as a football player. Just a tremendously physically gifted guy, always has been, has had some rough matchups in his MMA career. Got in there with Daniel Cormier in his 5th professional fight, but he's got some legit wins too. He beat Derek Lewis in 2011. He beat Tim Sylvia. Beat Tony Lopez, which is never not a meaningful win. But then, I saw his fight with Chris Lockdeath in ONE FC, and that was a kind of a weird fight. And I really thought that was a fight that Johnson, by all rights, should have won. I believe he was a big betting favorite in that fight. But so, Johnson is talented, but he has always been inconsistent, regardless of the sport that he's been in.
Yeah, I don't know, and I don't know if he'll beat Volkov. I mean, the thing with Volkov is that he's one of those fighters who his weakness is Johnson's strength, which is takedowns and wrestling and getting controlled. But he's also like tough as old boots. Volkov is one of those guys that Johnson could spend a round just putting leather on him and then have to fight him in round 2.
Yeah, absolutely. And Johnson, tremendously physically talented, pretty solid, if a pretty basic kind of wrestler. I believe he was like a state wrestling champ in high school. But yeah, so I mean, his game is basic, but it works for the most part, like a lot of heavyweights. He's kind of standard heavyweight in that regard, but great size, great athleticism. It wouldn't surprise me if he just ran through Volkov. It wouldn't surprise me if he walked into a Volkov head kick. It wouldn't surprise me if he gassed and Volkov just wore him down for a decision. All of those options are on the table here.
Yeah. And the other one, so Rafael Carvalho, any thoughts on him? Because he's fighting Joe Schilling.
So this is interesting. This is an interesting fight. I recall watching Carvalho go out there and do the damn thing with Brian Rogers in his last fight. Just brutally knocked him out. Kid's a real good striker. He's got great size. I guess I thought he was younger than he actually is. I thought he was like 23 or 24. So if he goes out there and he obliges Schilling in a stand-up fight / clinch fight, then he's going to get beaten. I'm not sure if Carvalho has any idea how to wrestle and grapple. I'll be real honest.
Yeah.
I just do not know. I have not watched that much film on him. What are your thoughts, Zane?
My thoughts are that he is going to try and outstrike Joe Schilling to the moment that he gets hit. And the question will be, does he get hit hard enough to get knocked out? And then the other question has Joe Schilling improved enough on his basic skills beyond kickboxing to stop from getting taken down and out grappled? Because Carvalho is obviously like a Muay Thai striker at his core, and I think he's going to try to beat Schilling there, but he's trained MMA for long enough and consistently enough that I'm sure he knows how to at least hit a takedown or attempt one. And I have no idea if Schilling knows how to defend one at all.
Yeah, to me, the thing that interests me, and this is honestly, I just have not watched enough film to know the answer to this question, is if Carvalho wants to take him down, is he going to try and do it from the clinch, or is he going to try and do it on shots? Because if he can if he can shoot and he can set them up well enough to get in on Schilling's hips, he should be able to take him down. Because like no matter how much takedown defense Joe Schilling is trained, it's probably not going to be enough to stuff a dude who has some idea how to finish a double. But if it's in the clinch, one of the things that has always interested me about a guy like Schilling in MMA as opposed to kickboxing is Schilling's a real good clinch fighter. You know,
yeah.
He's not a Thai stylist by any stretch of the imagination, but he's a lot better in the clinch than a lot of Dutch style guys are. He's kind of got a weird, unique style all his own, and he's lost in the clinch to the really elite clinch fighters. Guys like Artem Levin and Simon Marcus have taken him apart in the clinch, but he's still a lot better there than most kickboxers turned MMA fighters. You know, so if Carvalho's got to get his takedowns from the clinch, that's a much harder proposition than if he's got a shot-based takedown game. I just don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. And win or lose, I mean, Carvalho's still a fun fighter. Like, he's a huge, powerful middleweight. And he's a guy, like I say, he just, he basically started taking his MMA career seriously in 2012. That was when his MMA career started. So even at 28, you're still looking at a guy who, for the next 7 years, we could be watching a huge, powerful Brazilian Muay Thai striker.
Yeah, which is like, a Scott Coker special. Like Coker has made a habit, and I guess Rich Chu actually. Rich Chu loves these dudes, just loves them. Like he found Fei Zhao back in the day. Fei Zhao fits this mold. Rich Chu found Marcos Rogerio de Lima, who's now in the UFC, but who had a little go around in Strikeforce first. I mean, they have found Brazilian Muay Thai guys for years now, and you know what? That's awesome because they're fun fighters. Like the type of fighter that Carvalho represents is a tremendously fun one, and I would be happy if they put two or three of these guys on every card.
Yeah, I realize that he just failed the drug test, but it's sort of like the fun that Bellator can have and that Strikeforce had with big Brazilian Muay Thai strikers is exactly the fun that the UFC doesn't have with somebody like George Oliveira when they match him up with, Diego or with Diego Lima. Is Diego Lima or is it Douglas? I can never remember.
Diego Lima. Yeah.
What?
Yeah, it's Diego.
Yeah, when they match him up with Diego Lima or who did he just lose to? Oh, with Christos Giagos. It's just like that's such a waste. Like,
you've got to sign that dude.
Yeah, like you've got a dude who's never going to be a great fighter. Like he's never going to be a championship contender for you. Just have fun with him. Like get some fun action fights out there for him.
Yeah, it's like it would be like the UFC signing Melvin Manhoef and then putting him in there with Rafael Natal. Like, why would you sign Melvin Manhoef to put him in there with Rafael Natal? Because you sign Jorge Oliveira, who not a great fighter, is not good. He's not young. He's not going to get a lot better. But he can get there and he can have a couple of bangers for you. And I think that. Exactly that lesson Rich Chu knows better than anybody. So when you sign Rafael Carvalho, put him in there with Brian Rogers. Put him in there with Joe Schilling. Like, let's have those fun fights. you know? So,
Yeah.
and I think this dude's going to be down to bang with Schilling.
I do too. That's why I think it'll be the moment he gets hit hard the first time that will tell us everything we need to know about the rest of the fight. You know.
Yeah, probably so.
Um,
Let's see.
I
Anything
forgot
else
about
on here?
yeah, one guy I forgot totally. Big prospect, Will Brooks. Shit, dude has been fighting
Do you
since
still consider Brooks
2011.
a prospect? Oh God, I always feel like Brooks has been in the game since like 2008 or 2009, and that's just as not true now as it was the last time I thought of this.
Yeah, he is super young in the game still. You know, and he's got all. You know, at that point, like he's on that phenom prospect track. You know, he's got
He's got 16.
hmm?
He's got six. I mean, he's got 16 fights under his belt. He's moved fast. He's gotten a
Yeah.
lot of experience against very good opposition.
Yeah, he moved fast and he's climbed he's climbed up to the elite really quickly. You know, he's on that level of like in 3 years of his debut, he beat Mike Chandler.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's an interesting fighter in that I think he's one of the few guys in Bellator who's playing a UFC kind of game. In that he cuts a lot of weight. He's really big. There's an emphasis placed on well-roundedness. Like he can fight everywhere. He's a good inside fighter, which I think we see more of in the UFC than we do in Bellator for a variety of reasons. Like I think that he's just playing a different kind of game. Like when you compare, like Chandler is a UFC featherweight, Eddie Alvarez is a UFC featherweight. You know, like Dave Jansen, I guess, would probably be a lightweight. No, Dave Jansen would be a featherweight in the UFC too. When I interviewed him, I think he said he was 168 pounds, like 10 days out from the fight.
Mm-hmm.
So these are dudes who would be featherweights in the UFC. Brooks is playing a different game. Brooks is playing that ATT game where size matters and you're going to use it as much as you can. But yeah, I mean, I know you talked to him this week, right, Zane?
Yep.
I talked to him last week. Super impressive dude. Got a good head on his shoulders. Fiery. He's fiery. He's got that in him. So I like him a lot. I think he's a legit kind of top 10-ish lightweight already. I wouldn't be surprised if he rose higher.
Yeah, I do think that I think he's destined. He may be one of those fighters that outgrows Bellator in not like in the same way that Hector Lombard did. You know, where it's just like we cannot find this guy a legit fight to save our lives.
Yeah, I think that's always going to be the risk with that promotion. But you know, here's hoping that Brooks did Brooks sign another deal with them? Do you know off the top of your head?
I do not know that. And I don't and you know, and the thing is too, unfortunately for him, he's at lightweight, which means that there's always gonna be fun fights. Like no matter what, they will be able to find guys to get in there with him. It's not like middleweight where it was like, well, Trevor Prangley, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right, because they can always sign Melvin Gillard coming off a win in Titan or something, you know?
Yeah.
Like so, or whoever the equivalent of Melvin Gillard is 16 months from now. So there's that. You're absolutely right about that. I don't think that Brooks is going to be one of those dudes who sticks around Bellator for long periods of time. You know, I think that he's a dude that when given an equivalent offer, he would rather go to the UFC. Also because all his teammates are there, you know?
Yeah.
But at the same time, if Bellator keeps making Brooks better offers, I wouldn't be surprised if he stuck around there. It all depends on what direction Coker and Shu want to go with Bellator, how much they want to try and hang on to these guys, and what kind of offers they're willing to make. I guess he'll probably be the first big test case that we get.
He may be the first, you know, while Rampage is kind of the new big test case, the first big test case for the new Bellator, even if it's an old contract, but he may be the first, he may be the first champ under the new regime to test the waters. Otherwise, let's take just a quick breeze at World Series of Fighting 20. This is one of those cards that there's a bunch of guys. Islam Mamedov has already won. He was like the big undercard fighter that I was really looking forward to. Um, but Dugulubgov, Fodor, Mako, they're all kind of prospects in development. I mean, even Newell I don't know. Newell's one of those fighters that he's a prospect ish, but it's a hard case.
Yeah. Yeah, there was not a whole lot on this one to be excited about. Mamedov, of course, had been training at AKA with Khabib Nurmagomedov and the Dagestani knuckle game cartel leading up to this fight. I honestly don't know much about him. Dugulubgov is a guy I've liked for a while now, but is he coming off a win or is he coming off that loss?
I
Like
believe
the last fight I saw him.
he's coming off a win. He's one of those guys who's like a pure physical talent who is yet to hit the switch and actually turn that into being a great fighter.
Yeah, he reminds me a lot of a guy who just signed with UFC, Levan Makashvili, in terms of the combination of skills. Real good but low output kickboxer, strong wrestler, surprisingly strong wrestler. But yeah, has yet to really turn the corner. Ben Fodor, aka Phoenix Jones, superhero.
Yep.
In case you want clear on that. I honestly don't quite know what to make of him. I've watched some of his amateur fights, I think, in the past, and I've watched him beat the crap out of some random dudes on the streets. So there's that. But it's hard for me not to see that as a publicity stunt. I don't know whether I should take Fodor seriously as a fighter.
I don't know. If he pepper sprays Wallow, I think Wallow's got to watch out. So that's that.
True. He's not allowed to wear armor, right?
Yeah. No, I don't think he's allowed to wear his body armor. Yeah, it's a card, it has fights that I'm interested in and just sort of this passing, I have no idea what this guy's going to show this time around. I should check it out. But anyway, I think that pretty much covers, we spent a lot more time talking about some of this stuff than even I thought we would. Any last notes here before we sign off?
See you back here next week.
Yeah, all right. Unless you can get that Moosin to reboot and get a fight with them, maybe.
Yeah, we'll see about that. No, I mean, always a pleasure chatting with you, Zane.
Yeah, good to have you back on. Well, hopefully we can get Tom off the campaign trail, tear him away from his libertarian fantasy camp, and bring him back into the fold for next week. So until then,
so mad that we pegged him as a Rand Paul supporter. Just so mad.
I told him ahead of time. He was not happy. And until then, you can find me online on Twitter at DZaneSimon. If I don't tweet back within 10 days, I may have been strangled to death by Tom Grant. You can find Pat at Patrick_Wyman. You can find him on Share.com. You can find me on Bloody Elbow. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it. That shit helps us a bunch. And subscribe to MMANation.com for our more Bloody Elbow stuff. Anyway, thanks for coming around. Talk to you next week.